The High Council of Vex'tai had been watching the little blue planet for exactly 7 cycles now. 7 cycles of what their intelligence networks had labeled as the Great Dying. 3 billion of the bipedal mammals had perished, 3 billion. And yet, somehow, inexplicably, the humans were still fighting back. Commander Zoltec flexed his forearms in what could only be described as cosmic frustration. His crimson eyes, all 6 of them, focused on the holographic display floating before him. The numbers didn't lie, but they certainly didn't make sense either. "Explain this to me again, Grax." Zoltec's voice carried the weight of someone who had conquered 47 star systems and was now utterly baffled by a single planet. "How exactly does a species that just lost half its population manage to destroy 6 of our dreadnoughts?" Grax, the resident xenobiologist, shifted uncomfortably on his tentacles. His pale green skin had taken on an unhealthy shade of yellow, a sure sign of stress among his people. "Sir, the data suggests that the human response to mass casualties has been unexpected." "Unexpected?" Zoltec's voice rose to a pitch that would have shattered glass if there was any glass on the bridge. "Grax, we glassed their major cities. We turned their capitals into smoking craters. We eliminated their governments, their military leadership, their entire infrastructure. They should be begging for mercy, not launching kamikaze attacks on our fleet." The truth was, Zoltec had expected this conquest to be simple. Humans, after all, were just another species of primitive mammals who had barely managed to crawl out of their gravity well. They didn't have energy shields, they didn't have plasma weapons, and they certainly didn't have the kind of technology that could threaten a galactic empire. What they did have, however, was apparently something far more dangerous, something the Vex'tai had never encountered in their 1,000-year history of galactic domination. "Sir," Grax began hesitantly, "perhaps we should review the psychological profiles we've compiled on the human species." Zoltec's eyes rolled in sequence, a particularly impressive display of annoyance. "Fine. But make it quick. I have a war to win." The holographic display shifted, showing grainy footage of human settlements in the aftermath of the initial bombardment. What should have been scenes of surrender and despair instead showed something that made Zoltec's blood run cold. The humans were rebuilding. Not just rebuilding, but rebuilding with a vengeance that bordered on the supernatural. "Observe Sector 7. Grax pointed with one of his tentacles. "New Angeles. Population 12 million before our attack. After our bombardment, approximately 2 million survivors. By our calculations, it should take them 50 years to rebuild even basic infrastructure." The image zoomed in, showing massive construction projects, improvised factories, and what appeared to be weapons manufacturing facilities. All of this had been built in just 6 months. "They're not just rebuilding," Zoltec muttered, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They're building better." "Correct, sir. And that's not the strangest part." Grax manipulated the display again. "Watch this." The footage showed a group of humans, maybe 30 of them, standing in what used to be a park. They were holding hands, their heads bowed. It looked like some kind of religious ceremony. "Touching," Zoltec said dryly. "I didn't know humans had time for prayer when they should be dying." "It's not prayer, sir. It's planning." The scene shifted, showing the same humans 3 days later. They had somehow managed to hijack one of the Vex'tai's smaller ships, strip it for parts, and use those parts to build what could only be described as a weapon of mass destruction. It's a weapon that had subsequently been used to take out an entire Vex'tai battle cruiser. "How?" Zoltec's voice was barely a whisper now. "We're not entirely sure," Grax admitted. "But our analysis suggests that human psychological patterns under extreme stress differ significantly from every other species we've encountered. Most civilizations break down when faced with overwhelming casualties. Humans, however, seem to adapt. Adapt was putting it mildly. The humans weren't just adapting, they were evolving. It's not biologically, but psychologically and technologically. They were taking the Vex'tai's own weapons and turning them against their creators with an efficiency that was both impressive and terrifying." "Sir," another voice called from across the bridge. It was Nexus. The communications officer. We're receiving a transmission from Earth. Zoltec's eyes focused on the young officer. Put it through. AKT. The holographic display flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a human face. Female, probably in her 30s, with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to burn with an inner fire. She was standing in what appeared to be a makeshift command center, surrounded by screens and equipment that looked suspiciously like modified Vex'tai technology. "Hello there," the human said, her voice carrying a tone of casual friendliness that was completely at odds with the situation. "I'm Captain Elena Vasquez, representing what's left of the human race. I thought we should have a little chat." Zoltec found himself leaning forward. This was unexpected. Most species, when faced with superior firepower, either surrendered immediately or died fighting. They didn't chat. "I am Commander Zoltec of the Vex'tai Imperial Fleet," he replied, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been challenged. "You will surrender immediately, or we will complete the destruction of your planet." Elena smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Well, Commander, that's where we have a little problem. You see, you've already killed 3 billion of us, 3 billion people who had families, dreams, hopes for the future, and now you're threatening to kill the rest of us. Your point?" Zoltec's voice was cold as the void of space. "My point is that you've made a fundamental error in your calculations. You've confused us with a species that has something left to lose." The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. "Sir," Grax said quietly, "perhaps we should reconsider our approach." "Reconsider?" Zoltec's voice was rising again. "They're a primitive species with inferior technology. What could they possibly do to us?" The answer came exactly 37 minutes later, in the form of a massive explosion that took out the Vex'tai flagship's main reactor. As emergency lights flickered on across the bridge, Zoltec realized that perhaps he had underestimated the humans, perhaps significantly. "Damage report." He barked. "Sir," called the tactical officer. "It appears the humans have somehow weaponized their own nuclear waste. They've launched 17 improvised warheads at our fleet. Each one is highly radioactive and designed to cause maximum damage to our shielding systems." Zoltec stared at the tactical display. The humans were using their own radioactive waste as weapons. They were essentially turning their planet's garbage into instruments of war. It was brilliant, terrifying, and completely insane. "Sir," Grax said quietly, "I believe we may have awakened something we don't understand." On the planet below, Elena Vasquez stood in her command center, watching the Vex'tai fleet struggle to deal with the radioactive warheads. Around her, the survivors of humanity worked with a focused intensity that would have impressed even the most dedicated military force. "Status report," she called out. "The fleet's taken significant damage," replied Marcus Webb, her second in command. "Their main ships are dealing with radiation contamination. It'll take them at least 12 hours to decontaminate their systems." "Good. That gives us time for Phase 2, Marcus grinned. It was the kind of grin that suggested he was looking forward to Phase 2 with considerable enthusiasm. "The orbital miners are in position. We've got 17 asteroid chunks loaded with every bit of explosives we could manufacture." Elena nodded. The plan was simple, elegant, and absolutely ruthless. While the Vex'tai were dealing with radioactive contamination, the humans would drop 17 asteroids on their fleet. Not just any asteroids, but asteroids that had been hollowed out and filled with explosive charges made from mining equipment, industrial chemicals, and the kind of creative engineering that only came from a species with nothing left to lose. "Commander," called Sarah Kim from the communications station, "we're getting chatter from the alien fleet. They're calling for reinforcements." Elena's smile widened. "Let them. We've got plenty more surprises where those came from." The truth was, the humans had been preparing for this moment from the second the first Vex'tai ships had appeared in Earth's orbit. Not preparing to surrender, not preparing to negotiate, but preparing to fight with every dirty trick, every desperate gambit, and every last-ditch effort they could conceive. They had turned their entire planet into a weapon. Their cities were now fortress factories. Their survivors were now engineers of destruction, and their desperation had become their greatest strength. "Sir," Grax said to Zoltec, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm reading massive kinetic projectiles heading toward our position. 17 large objects, each approximately the size of a small moon. Zoltec's eyes widened. All 6 of them, evasive maneuvers. All ships, emergency burn. But it was too late. The first asteroid struck the Vex'tai cruiser Devastator, and the explosion that followed lit up the night sky like a second sun. The hollow asteroid, packed with explosives and guided by human ingenuity, had turned into a weapon of unprecedented destructive power. As the Vex'tai fleet burned around him, Zoltec realized that he had made a terrible mistake. He had assumed that the humans would fight like every other species, with conventional tactics and predictable strategies. Instead, they had chosen to fight like humans, and that, it turned out, was something entirely different. The communications array crackled to life again, and Elena's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, but her eyes still burned with that same inner fire. Commander Zoltec, she said, her voice carrying across the void, I hope you're beginning to understand what you've gotten yourself into. You killed 3 billion of us. 3 billion people who might have been willing to negotiate, to find a peaceful solution. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of an entire species. But you didn't kill them. You killed us, and we're the ones who are left. We're the ones who watched our world burn. We're the ones who have nothing left to lose and everything to gain from making your lives as miserable as possible. The transmission cut out again, and Zoltec sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display. Half his fleet was gone. The other half was damaged, contaminated, and facing an enemy that seemed to operate by rules he didn't understand. Sir, Grax said quietly, perhaps we should withdraw and regroup. Zoltec nodded slowly. For the first time in his military career, he was facing an enemy that had turned desperation into a weapon. And that weapon was proving to be more effective than anything in the Vex'tai arsenal. Send word to High Command, he said finally. Tell them we need more ships. Many more ships. How many, sir? Zoltec looked at the tactical display, where the burning remains of his fleet painted the void in shades of orange and red. All of them. Send all of them. Because somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible thought was beginning to form. A thought that would have been unthinkable just hours before. What if the humans won? 48 hours later, Zoltec was no longer asking hypothetical questions about human victory. He was living the nightmare of it. The reinforcements had arrived, just as he had requested. 3 full battle fleets, each one carrying enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. The pride of the Vex'tai Empire, commanded by Admiral Korven herself, the legendary conqueror of the Andorian sector. They had lasted exactly 6 hours. Report. Admiral Korven's voice crackled through the emergency communications channel. Her flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was listing badly to starboard, venting atmosphere and debris into the void. Came the voice of Lieutenant Brack, barely audible through the static. The humans have deployed some kind of viral weapon. It's not biological. It's digital. They've somehow infected our computer systems through our own communication networks. Korven's 4 eyes narrowed. A digital virus was theoretically possible, but it required intimate knowledge of Vex'tai computer architecture, the knowledge that these primitive humans shouldn't possess. Explain, she commanded. They've been monitoring our transmissions, learning our language, our protocols, our security codes. Then they sent us what appeared to be a surrender transmission. When we opened it, Brack's voice trailed off. When we opened it, what? It wasn't a surrender, It was a Trojan horse, a computer program disguised as a communication. It's rewriting our navigation systems, turning our weapons against each other, and worst of all, it's learning. The more ships it infects, the smarter it gets. Down on Earth, Elena Vasquez allowed herself a moment of satisfaction as she watched the alien fleet tear itself apart. The plan had been audacious even by human standards. Take advantage of the aliens' arrogance, their assumption that humans were too primitive to understand advanced technology. Tommy, how's our digital friend performing? She asked. Tommy Martinez, barely 19 years old, And already one of Earth's most brilliant hackers grinned from behind his bank of salvaged computers. The virus is exceeding expectations, Captain. It's not just disrupting their systems anymore. It's actively learning their technology and sending the data back to us. Elena nodded. The virus, which they had nicknamed Pandora, was more than just a weapon. It was a teacher, showing them how Vex'tai technology worked, how their ships were built, how their weapons functioned. Every second it remained active, humanity learned more about their enemies. Dr. Foster, what's the status on Project Lazarus? Elena turned to the elderly scientist who had once worked for NASA and was now Earth's leading expert on alien technology. Dr. Janet Foster looked up from her workstation, her gray hair disheveled and her eyes bright with excitement. We've successfully reverse-engineered their shield generators. Not only can we now build our own, but we've found a critical weakness in their design, a harmonic frequency that causes catastrophic resonance failure. How catastrophic? Marcus Webb asked. Foster's smile was positively wicked. Imagine tuning a guitar string until it snaps, but instead of a string, it's their entire energy grid. Back on the Vex'tai flagship, Admiral Korven was beginning to understand just how thoroughly they had underestimated their enemy. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were adapting, learning, and evolving at a rate that defied every military doctrine in the Vex'tai Empire. Admiral, called Commander Zoltec from his damaged ship, we're receiving another transmission from the planet. Put it through. But run it through our best security protocols first. The holographic display flickered, and Elena's face appeared. But she wasn't alone this time. Behind her stood dozens of other humans, each one representing a different aspect of Earth's resistance. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, hackers, even children who had lost their families and were now contributing to the war effort. Admiral Korven, Elena began, and the fact that she knew the Admiral's name sent a chill through the bridge crew. I'm Captain Elena Vasquez, and these are my people, what's left of them. Anyway, Korven's voice was cold as interstellar ice. You will surrender immediately, or we will glass your entire planet. Elena laughed. Actually laughed. With what fleet? Look around you, Admiral. Your ships are destroying each other. Your computer systems are compromised. Your reinforcements are burning in space, and we're just getting started. What do you want? Korven asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. What do we want? Elena's voice rose, and for the first time, the full weight of human grief and rage was audible. We want our 3 billion people back. We want our cities rebuilt. We want our children to grow up in a world that doesn't have alien warships in orbit. She paused, and when she continued, her voice was deadly quiet. But since we can't have any of that, we'll settle for making sure you never do this to anyone else. Ever. Ever. The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent. Admiral, Zoltec said quietly, I recommend immediate withdrawal. We've lost 70% of our fleet. Our computer systems are compromised, and they seem to know more about our technology than we do. But Korven was not a 4-time conqueror of star systems because she gave up easily. No. Deploy the planet killer. If we can't conquer them, we'll sterilize the entire system. The planet killer was the Vex'tai Empire's ultimate weapon. A massive ship, larger than most moons, designed for one purpose, to crack planets like eggs. It had been used only 3 times in the Empire's history, and each time it had worked flawlessly. Admiral, Brack's voice was hesitant. The planet killer's systems have also been infected by the virus. Then we'll operate it manually. How long until it's in position? 6 hours. 6 hours. Elena stared at the massive ship approaching Earth's orbit, and for the first time since the war began, she felt a moment of genuine fear. The planet killer was beyond anything they had prepared for. Options? She asked her team. We could try to hack it, Tommy suggested. But its systems are more isolated than the fleet ships. The virus might not be able to penetrate deep enough. What about a direct assault? Marcus asked. Dr. Foster shook her head. That ship has armor plating 3 kilometers thick. Our weapons wouldn't even scratch it. Elena closed her eyes, thinking. There had to be something, some weakness, some flaw, some human solution to an impossible problem. Then it hit her. Tommy, can you get me a communication channel to every human settlement on the planet? Sure, but why? Elena's smile was grim. Because we're going to do something that's never been done before. We're going to turn our entire planet into a weapon. What do you mean? Main? Every nuclear reactor, every power plant, every battery, every solar panel, every piece of technology that generates or stores energy. We're going to network them all together and create the largest electromagnetic pulse in recorded history. Dr. Foster's eyes widened. That could work, but the power requirements would be enormous, and the backlash could destroy every electronic device on the planet, including our own systems, Marcus added. Elena nodded. It's a one-shot deal. We either destroy that planet killer, or we go back to fighting with sticks and stones, but at least we'll be alive to do it. The next 5 hours were a frantic race against time. Every human settlement on Earth worked together, linking their power sources into a single, massive grid. Nuclear submarines surfaced to connect their reactors. Solar farms redirected their entire output. Even car batteries were wired into the growing network. Meanwhile, in space, Admiral Korven watched the human planet with growing unease. The energy readings from the surface were unlike anything she had ever seen. What are they doing down there? She muttered. Unknown, Admiral. But power generation across the planet has increased by 4,000%. On Earth, Elena stood in the control center, her hand hovering over the activation switch. Around her, her team prepared for what might be humanity's final gambit. All stations report ready, Tommy announced. Reactor grid online, called Dr. Foster. All settlements connected, Marcus added. Elena took a deep breath. This is for the 3 billion, she whispered, and pressed the switch. The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from Earth was visible from 3 star systems away. It washed over the planet killer like a tide of raw energy, overwhelming its shields, frying its circuits, and turning the most feared weapon in the Vex'tai arsenal into a drifting piece of scrap metal. But the pulse didn't stop there. It continued outward, striking the remaining Vex'tai fleet, their communication relays, even their distant support ships. In the span of 30 seconds, the entire Vex'tai invasion force was reduced to powerless hulks floating in space. On the Admiral's bridge, emergency lighting flickered weakly as backup systems struggled to come online. Damage report. Korven called into the darkness. All primary systems offline. Communications down, weapons down, engines down. Life support running on emergency power only. In the silence that followed, a new sound echoed through the ship. It was faint at first, but growing stronger. The sound of small craft approaching. Admiral Brack's voice was barely a whisper. We're being boarded. The humans who came aboard the Vex'tai ships were not the same species that the Empire had first encountered. These were survivors, hardened by loss and transformed by necessity. They moved through the darkened corridors with purpose, securing ship after ship, taking prisoners and, most importantly, claiming technology. Admiral Korven found herself face-to-face with Elena Vasquez in her own command center. The human was wearing a makeshift environmental suit and carrying what appeared to be a weapon cobbled together from alien and human parts. Surrender, Elena said simply. Korven looked around at her disabled ship, her captured crew, her ruined fleet. What are your terms? Complete withdrawal from human space, reparations for the 3 billion dead, and a promise that the Vex'tai Empire will never again attack a planet without provocation. And if we refuse? Elena's smile was cold as the void. Then we use your own ships to visit your homeworld, and we show you exactly what we learned from watching our planet burn. The threat hung in the air between them. Korven realized that these humans, these supposedly primitive mammals, had not just defeated the Vex'tai Empire. They had absorbed its technology, learned its secrets, and turned its own weapons against it. They had become something new. Something dangerous, something that the galaxy had never seen before. I accept your terms, Korven said quietly. 6 months later, the Vex'tai Empire signed the Treaty of Seoul, formally recognizing human sovereignty and establishing Earth as an independent world. The surviving human population, now numbering just over 4 billion, had not only survived their first contact with the hostile alien species but had emerged victorious. But more than that, they had changed. The desperate ingenuity that had saved them during the war remained with them afterward. They rebuilt their world not as it had been, but as something stronger, more unified, and infinitely more dangerous to those who might threaten it. Elena Vasquez, now serving as Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council, that stood before the assembled representatives of 100 worlds and delivered humanity's first address to the wider universe. "We are the children of a world that burned," she said, her voice carrying across the vast assembly hall. "We are the descendants of 3 billion dead. We are the survivors who turned our grief into strength, our anger into innovation, and our desperation into victory." She paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces, some curious, some fearful, all listening. "We don't want to conquer anyone. We don't want to rule anyone. We just want to live in peace. But if you threaten us, if you attack us, if you make the mistake of thinking we're weak because we're young," her smile was visible to every delegate in the hall, "remember what happened to the Vex'tai. Remember that we are the species that turned an entire planet into a weapon. Remember that we are humanity. And we are not going anywhere." The applause that followed was uncertain, scattered, but respectful, as it should be. Because everyone in that hall now understood a fundamental truth about the newest members of the galactic community. Humanity had been forged in fire, tempered by loss, and shaped by the kind of desperate innovation that only came from having nothing left to lose. They were no longer the primitive species that had first detected alien signals in their sky. They were something else entirely. Something that the galaxy would have to learn to live with. They were the survivors. And they were magnificent.